home to execute austerities, they met Lord Shiva, who, out of great mercy, instructed them about the absolute truth. All the sons of Prichinabhari meditated upon the instructions, chanting and worshipping them with great care and attention. So the first 15 verses of the chapter are kind of setting the scene for the Rudra Gita to be spoken. Actually, the first 32 verses. The first 15 verses is, we were talking about the descendants of Maharaj Prithu that finally led us to Prachinabhari and the Prachetas, and then a little bit about the nature of Prachinabhari, that he was an expert in Karma Kand, and then he was married to the daughter of Samudra, who was extremely beautiful. He had he had the from her he had the Prachetas, and Prachinabhari had the status of being a Prajapati, which means an exalted personality who is empowered to populate the universe, or in this case, the Earth planet. So accordingly, he instructs the Prachetas to perform austerities in preparation for Grahastha life. And from verse 16 to 32 is essentially a description of the meeting of the Prachetas with Lord Shiva. And then the Rudra Gita actually starts from verse 33. So the 15th is essentially the last verse in the first section, which is the genealogical line of Prithu Maharaj. So, so in this verse, it is mentioned that when the Prachetas left home under the instruction of their father, they met Lord Shiva. So one may wonder, what was the qualification of the Prachetas? That a personality as exalted as Lord Shiva accepted them as his disciple and instructed them. So they were not even meditating on Lord Shiva. In fact, they hadn't started meditation. They were on their way, and so they had not performed austerities. So it wasn't that by the pious credit of the tapa, they attracted the mercy of Lord Shiva. So two reasons are given. One is that it is stated that the Prachetas were going with such determination to worship the Supreme Lord. So we'll read more about this later on, but devotees are very much taken in by when other devotees make a firm resolve to increase their spiritual attraction. And we see it in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, that Narad Muni was simply attracted by his firm resolve. That's what he tested him also. But Dhruva had no pious credits. He was just a 5-year-old boy. And yet, Narad Muni came on his own to give him mercy. Similarly, Lord Shiva comes on his own, simply attracted by the fact that they had strong resolve to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Second reason that is given is that the Prachetas demonstrated complete obedience to authority. So the authority figure in this case was Maharaj Prachinabhari. That he instructed them, you do this, and they said absolutely. So the father is like a guru. And seeing the Prachetas behave as ideal disciples, it attracted the mercy of of another exalted Guru, which is Lord Shiva. So, as we will see that the Prachetas, the same faith and obedience that the same faith and obedience that they demonstrated in following the instructions of the Father, they will also demonstrate that in following the instructions of Lord Shiva. And practically we see that ourselves also, that by service to one's Guru, one attracts the mercy of other gurus, other exalted personalities. And ultimately, this will lead them to perfection. So Maitreya says that tadhyantu japantascha pujayantascha samyata, that they were meditating, chanting, and worshipping according to the instructions given by Lord Shiva. So that is the perfection of the Prachetas, that their obedience to the instructions of their Guru, and the fact that they had strong resolve to worship Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada says in the purport that this is also the verdict of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who, while explaining the verse of Bhagavad Gita beginning with Vivasatmika Buddhi Eke Kuru Nandana, this is 241, points out that the order of the spiritual master is the life substance of the disciple. So this is a verse we are all familiar with. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna starts talking about how does one begin one's spiritual life. And then he says, Vyasabhika buddhi eke kuru nandana, bahushakanantascha buddhya. So, in the purport, Vishwanath Chakravarti says that when Krishna says, Vyasatmika buddhir eke kuru nandana, he means that the person is single-minded in following the instructions of the spiritual master. There are different explanations for Vyasatmika buddhi, that one is single-minded in worshipping Krishna, one is single-minded in following the Vedic injunctions. But ultimately, Vishwanath Chakravarti says that it actually points to single-mindedly following the instructions of the Guru, because all these things come through the instructions of the Guru. So Prabhupada says that ultimately the only business of the disciple is to follow the orders of the Guru. In fact, to the extent he says that one should not even consider whether they're making any spiritual progress, whether they're going back to Godhead, all that is secondary. The only business should be to meditate on and execute the instructions. Now, one might say that if one is engaging in this to make spiritual progress, then why not consider these aspects? And the reason Prabhupada is saying this is because all this will automatically happen. That simply by following the instruction of the Guru, making spiritual progress is inevitable. Progressing on the journey back to Godhead is irrevocable. So there's no need to think separately about it. It will happen by its own. Okay. Verse 16. Vidurvacha prachetasham giritrena yathasit pathi sangamaha yat utaha haraha pritas tanno brahman vadarthavat. Vidur asked Maitreya, my dear Brahman, why did the Prachetas meet Lord Shiva on the way? Please tell me how the meeting happened, how Lord Shiva became very pleased with them, and how he instructed them. Certainly, such talks are important, and I wish that you please be merciful upon me and describe them. So 17 verses from 16 to 32 will describe the meeting of the Prachetas with Lord Shiva. And the reason Vidur is asking is because he knows that when exalted personalities meet, then undoubtedly the conversation will be saturated with Krishna Katha. That's why he asks the conversation between Narad and Brahma and Vishnu. Essentially, the whole Bhagavatam is a series of conversations between exalted devotees. So in that mood, Vidur is asking Maitreya. Right? Same thing, we see that eagerness in Parishit Maharaj. We see that in the sages headed by Shaunaka. Right? They were constantly asking, what did he say? What did he say? What was the conversation? Because when devotees meet, Krishna Katha, and other devotees are attracted to it because such conversation is further embellished by the realization of the devotees. Right? One can read the scriptures and understand the tattva, but when devotees are talking with one another, exalted devotees, then the conversation is embellished by the respective realization of the devotees. The Prabhupada writes in the purport that Vidur was similarly eager to hear from the great sage Maitreya about the talks between Lord Shiva and the Prachetas. Okay, verse 17. Sangama khalu viprarse Shivena shariranam durlabho munayo dadyo asangatyam abhipshitam. The great sage Vidur continued, O best of the Brahmanas, it is very difficult for living entities encaged within this material body to have personal contact with Lord Shiva. Even great sages who have no material attachments do not contact him, despite their always being absorbed in meditation to attain his personal contact. So in 2 verses, Vidur glorifies Lord Shiva and how difficult it is to get his audience. Prabhupada also notes that while Krishna comes as many incarnations, right? In the beginning of the Bhagavatam, we talk about the various kinds of incarnations, and then Sutta Goswami says that they're like waves in an ocean. They're unlimited and continuous. But Prabhupada says that Lord Shiva rarely incarnates. And when he does, it is to fulfill the order of Lord Vishnu. So Prabhupada says that in this regard, it is stated that in the Padma Puran, Lord Shiva appeared as a Brahmana in the age of Kali to preach the Mayavad philosophy, which is nothing but a type of Buddhist philosophy. It is stated in Padma Puran, Mayavadam ashakshastram prachannam bodhamuchyate Mayeva vihitim devi kalau brahmana murtina. So this is Lord Shiva speaking to Parvati Devi, and here he foretells that he will spread the Mayavadi philosophy in the guise of a sannyasi Brahman just to eradicate Buddhist philosophy. So Prabhupada says this sannyasi was Sripad Shankaracharya. And then later he said, generally people who worship Lord Shiva for some material benefit, although they cannot see him personally, they derive great material profit by worshipping him. So the appearance of Lord Shiva to those who are materially embodied, who are in this material world, is very rare. This talking actions, Prabhupada talks about Sripad Shakracharya, just expanding a little bit more on that, that Srila Vyasadeva, his philosophy is known as Parinamvad, which essentially says that the entire universe is a transformation of the Supreme Lord. Sripad Shankaracharya rejected this because his premise was that if the Lord changed, then the Lord cannot be supreme because by definition the Supreme is unchangeable. So therefore he concluded that Vyasa is incorrect. So then how does Shankaracharya explain the universe? With Vivartavad, that all you see around you is not a transformation of the Lord, it's just an illusion, which means it's not real, which means that it has no basis. Right? So that's how he explains the fact that the Lord is unchangeable, but what we see around ourselves, the changes that we see around ourselves, is essentially an illusion. And when you dispel that illusion, you become a part of the unchangeable Lord, which is the Brahman. Later on, the Vaishnavacharyas, they refuted Shankaracharya's premise, in which he said that if the Lord changes, then it goes against the fact that the Lord is unchangeable. They say that the Lord is unchangeable, but his energies are transformative. And through his energy, he creates infinite variety. So an artist may create so many paintings. The artist does not change. It's just his imagination, his skill, his getting together of various elements. The potter can make so many pots. So by introducing the fact that the energies of the Lord are dependent on the Lord, but the Lord is not the energy. He is more than the energy. They refuted Shankaracharya's Vivarta Vada. Okay, moving on to verse 18. Atmaramo piyastvasya lokakalpasya radhase shaktaya yukto vicharati Ghoraya Bhagavan Bhavaha. Lord Shiva, the most powerful demigod, second only to Lord Vishnu, is self-sufficient. Although he has nothing to aspire for in the material world, for the benefit of those in the material world, he is always busily engaged everywhere and is accompanied by his dangerous energies, like the goddess Kali and the goddess Durga. So this verse is essentially a glorification of Lord Shiva. Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he talks about some other glories of Lord Shiva, and I've kind of summarized them. So Lord Shiva is the best of Vaishnavas, Vaishnanam Yathashram. Then he is the preceptor of the Rudra Sampradaya. And the disciplic succession is known as Vishnu Swami Sampradaya. And Prabhupada says that the current Vishnu Swami Sampradaya is also known as Vallabha Sampradaya. So this is the Natwara where the Lord is worshipped as a child. It was started by Vallabhacharya, who was a contemporary of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then Lord Shiva is the most powerful demigod, second only to Vishnu. Of course, Lord Vishnu is not a demigod, and Lord Shiva is not the typical demigod, but just in terms of his position. So Brahma says in the Brahma Samhita, Kshiram Yathadadi Vikar Vishesha Yoga, which talks about the relationship between Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva, and milk and yogurt. They are almost the same, but slight difference that yogurt, milk can become yogurt, but yogurt cannot become milk. And what else? Lord Shiva is easily pleased to what? Material benediction. Right? He's called Ashutosh. But when he is really pleased, he awards bhakti, as we see in the case of the Prachetas. Then Lord Shiva is one of the 12 Mahajans. Mahajans want to completely understand the principles governing the law of karma. Then Lord Shiva is in charge of the Tamogun, which means that those who are in the mode of ignorance, Lord Shiva, out of compassion, gives them shelter. Then his potency, which is Durga Devi, is described as keeping all the living entities in the darkness of ignorance. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Nidra Rupa Samastita. Nidra Rupa. Nidra is another form of ignorance. Now, Lord Shiva, in his original form as Shambhu, he is the cause of the creation of the material world. Right? If you remember the Sarga description, that the glance of Mahavishnu is Shambhu. And the glance is the one that actually starts the process of the creation of the material world. Then Shambhu in his original form as Sadashiv is Vishnu Tattva. Right? He lives in Vaikuntha. And there he has the service of guiding the impersonalists to Bhakti Marg. So as Shankaracharya, he was trying to guide people to impersonalism, but in his eternal position as Sadashiv. So it is said that Sadashiv Loka is situated, Prabhupada says that between Vaikuntha and the material world, in the Brahman. And essentially in the Brahman, there is the Brahmavadis, the impersonalists. And Sadashiv is there preaching to them, to chant and help them make advancements to the spiritual world. Then Lord Shiva expands as Rudra and destroys the universe. Then also, with the help of his material energy, Kali or Durga, he is destroying. So in this verse, Lord Shiva is described as accompanied by his dangerous potency, Shaktya Ghoreya. Prabhupada speaks a little bit about Lord Shiva as Shankaracharya. He says that he appeared to preach Mayavad philosophy, but at the end of his pastimes in the form of Shankaracharya, he preached the Vaishnava philosophy, Bhaj Govindam, Bhaj Govindam, Bhaj Govindam, Moodamate. So he stressed worshipping Lord Krishna or Govinda 3 times in this verse, and specially warned his followers that they could not possibly achieve deliverance or mukti simply by word jugglery and grammatical puzzles. If one is actually serious to attain mukti, he must worship Lord Krishna. That is Sripad Shankaracharya's last instruction. Okay, so these 2 verses are essentially glorifying Lord Shiva. Verse 19, Maitre Uvacha Prachetesha Piturvakyam Sirsadaya Sadavaha Disham Prati Chimprayayus Tapasyadrata Chetashaha. The great sage Maitre continued, My dear Vidur, because of their pious nature, all the sons of Prachinabari very seriously accepted the words of their father with heart and soul. And with these words on their heads, they went to the west. They went toward the west to execute the father's order. So as we had initially said, that one of the qualifications of the Prachetas to receive the mercy of Lord Shiva is that they were pious, obedient, and eager to execute the instructions they received. So Prabhupada says that in this verse, sadhava means pious or well-behaved, is very important, especially at the present moment. It is derived from the word sadhu. A perfect sadhu is one who is always engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prachinabhari's sons are described as sadhava because of their complete obedience to their father. The father, king, and spiritual master are supposed to be representatives of the Personality of Godhead. And as such, they have to be respected as the Supreme Lord. And later he said the word Shirasha, on their head, is significant for the Prachetas, which means that they accepted it with complete surrender. Okay, verse 20. Sa samudram upavistri vistrinam apasyan sumahatsaraha mahan manaiva swachham prasanna salilashayam. While traveling, the Prachetas happened to see a great reservoir of water, which seemed almost as big as the ocean. The water of this lake was so calm and quiet that it seemed like the mind of a great soul. And its inhabitants, the aquatics, appeared very peaceful and happy to be under the protection of such a watery reserve. So the Prachetas happened to see it, which meant that they did not know, they were not heading towards it. They were heading in a westerly direction, but they happened to see this great reservoir of water. Right? So the word upa vistrinam is used. So upa means like. So it's more or less like an ocean. Srila Prabhupada opines that perhaps it's a bay. So bay is essentially the backflow of the water from the ocean. Because the ocean is so large, at different points where it meets land, then for various reasons, the water flows into the land. And then it creates a large lake-like structure. It's called a bay. So Prabhupada said it was probably a bay or another water body in the proximity of the ocean. But while the ocean could be turbulent, this water body was calm and tranquil. So Maitreya describes this, the water, to be calm like the mind of a great devotee. So the mind of a great devotee is always calm and pure and joyful. So when Srila Prabhupada was walking on the banks of the Pacific Ocean, and then he asked his disciples that, why do you think this ocean is so calm? And then they gave various answers. Prabhupada said, no. Finally said, Prabhupada, you tell us. And then he said, because it is so deep. So that is the reason why the mind of a devotee is so calm, because it is very, very deep. What is the depth? The depth is the understanding of Krishna, the realizations of the material and the spiritual forms. Prabhupada says that the material world is often described as an ocean of nations. In such an ocean, everything is agitated. The mind of a great devotee is also like an ocean or very large lake, but there is no agitation. And in the purport, Prabhupada actually gives 6 reasons that why the mind of a devotee is always calm. So one, he says, is because they have no personal desires. So he quotes Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhilila 19:149, that Krishna Bhakta Nishkam Ateva Shanta. The devotee of Lord Krishna is always peaceful because he has no desire. And then Prabhupada says, not that he has no desire. His desire is to serve the Lord. But it is still described as anabhilashita shunya, because that desire does not agitate. Second reason Prabhupada says is that it is calm because it is single-minded in the service of Guru and Krishna. Again, he says, Vyasadnika buddhi rekha, Guru Nandana. So it's not Bahushakha. Like one who is not attached to the service of Guru and Krishna, the mind is agitated in terms of what to do and what not to do. But the mind of a devotee is Vyasadnika, single-minded in the service of Guru. Third reason he says is that because devotees take shelter of another devotee, they automatically become pacified. Fourth reason, he says that the nature of a devotee is that even if there are reversals in life, they are not agitated. So he quotes 6.22 Bhagavad Gita, Yasmin Sito na dukhena gurunapi vichalyate. Fifth, he says is, due to his association with Krishna, a devotee is always very calm and cool. And finally, this is the peace formula given by Bhagavad Gita 5.29 Bhukta Ram Yagata Pasama, that because they consider Krishna to be the ultimate enjoyer, Shantim Rachati, the person acquires peace. Okay, next verse 21. Nila Rakta Palamboja Kalarendi Varakaram Hamsasara Sachakrava Karandava Nikujitam. In that great lake, there were different types of lotus flowers. Some of them were bluish and some of them were red. Some of them grew at night and some in the day. And some, like the Indivar lotus flower, in the evening. Combined together, the lotus flowers filled the lake so full that the lake appeared to be a great mine of such flowers. Consequently, on the shores there were swans and cranes, chakravakas, karandavs, and other beautiful birds standing about. So the birds were standing about because the lotus flowers were covering the surface of the lake. So the analogy of a mine is used, that a mine produces various kinds of ores. Similarly, the ocean is a mine of flowers. And in this particular case, just like there is some mines that produce iron and some mines that produce gold, in this case, the water is producing lotus flowers. So one can understand that this is an auspicious mine. Similarly, by the description of the birds, one can understand this is an auspicious place, swans and cranes and charvakas and karandavas. So inauspicious birds like crows and vultures, they tend to go to inauspicious places where there is remnants of dead bodies, there is dirt, filth. But here it is described that the place was covered with auspicious flowers and auspicious birds. And Prabhupada says that there are different types of human beings according to the association of the three modes of material nature. And there are similarly different kinds of birds, bees, trees, etc. Everything is divided according to the three qualities of the material nature. Birds like swans and cranes, who enjoy clear flowers and lotus flowers, are different from crows who enjoy filthy places. Similarly, there are persons who are controlled by the modes of ignorance and passion, and those who are controlled by the mode of goodness. The creation is so varied that there are also varieties found in every society. Thus, on the banks of this lake, all the superior birds live to enjoy that atmosphere created by the great reservoir filled with lotus flowers. Prabhupada is saying, just like birds and plants, human beings also, they congregate based on the modes. The pious people tend to congregate in places that are with other pious people, discuss pious topics, and vice versa. Verse 22. Matta Brahma Rasavarya Vishtaro Malatangripam Padmakosha Dikshu Vikshipa Pavanotsavam. There are various trees and creepers on all sides of the lake, and there were mad bumblebees humming all about them. The trees appeared to be very jolly due to the sweet humming of the bumblebees. And the saffron, which was contained in the lotus flowers, was being thrown into the air. These all created such an atmosphere that it appeared as though a festival was taking place. So, what were the various components of the festival? So everything was very pleasing to look at, right? So one of the components was the eyes, that there were beautiful flowers and attractive birds, calm and tranquil water. So that was the eyes. The second component of the festival was the ears. Specifically given over here is the humming of the bees. The third was the nose. Here it is said that the wind is blowing the saffron. And the fourth was touch. And touch again is the touch of the wind. So there was the aroma of the flowers carried by the wind, the touch of the wind, the festival of the eyes, and that of the ears. So all these together created a wonderful festival. Prabhupada said that the Prachetas considered such a place to be like a continuous festival. From this description, it appears that Prachetas reach Shivloka, which is supposed to be situated near the Himalaya mountains. So, in the fourth canto, there is also a description of Kailash. Right, in the fourth canto, sixth chapter, where Brahma takes the demigods after Lord Shiva. He sends his guards and they attack the yajna, they kill Daksha, the devas are scared. So then Brahma takes them all to meet Lord Shiva in Kailash. And we see there is a similar description of the place over there, where it said this festival of ambience, it would invoke lusty desires in the denizens of the heavenly planets. Here, the festival of ambience is promoting peace and tranquility in the Prachetas. Okay, so one component is how is the person himself situated? Like some person may go to a very calm, peaceful place and may become lusty over there, just because the wind is gentle and aromatic and the temperature is ambient, so they become lusty because they're themselves in that mode. But another person may go there and see how calm and peaceful it is and say that this is a good place for me to do my bhajan kirtan, right? So how a person conducts himself is dependent on his own consciousness perceiving the place around him. Okay, we'll do one more verse, and then after that we'll stop for discussion. Verse 23. Tatra Gandharvamakarnya Devyamargamanoharam Vishishmurajaputraste Mridangapanvadayano. The sons of the king became very much amazed when they heard vibration from various drums and kettle drums, along with other orderly musical sounds pleasing to the ear. So Srila Prabhupada once again uses this to refute the impersonalist conception of no variety. So Lord Shiva as Shankaracharya preached impersonalism, but we can see that as Lord Shiva, he is surrounded by variety. Now, Shiva Lok is not in the spiritual world, it's in the material world. But we see that this variety is actually being glorified by Lord Shiva and glorifying Lord Shiva. It is something that is pleasing him. So if he was truly an impersonalist, then he would have rejected all this variety. Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad states that that all these instruments are not overpowering the sounds, which indicates cohesion of service. So he just talking about from both aspects, that in a nicely performed orchestra, the musicians are all trying to support one another. They are not trying to overpower one another. Like sometimes in the temple, when we see there's kirtan going on, then sometimes the person with the mridanga, he's banging on the drum, and sometimes the person with the kartals or the wampers, he's just beating them, and that sound is covering everybody else, and the poor singer is trying to get his sound heard, and nobody can hear it. So when there is cooperation, then the mood is that of service. I remember this happened to me once. I was in the temple, and there was kirtan going on, and then I was playing kartal, and I was playing it very, very loudly. And then one of the senior devotees, Prabhupada disciple, he said that you should, he said that kartal means kartal, which means that it should be in the background, and it's essentially there to establish the beat for the person who's playing the mridanga, for the person who is singing. It's not supposed to dominate the kirtan. And in a way, it's true for all the instruments that are being played. So here also, we see the same mood, that it says that the orderly musical sounds were pleasing to the ears, which means there was synchronicity between them. They were supporting one another. So Prabhupada says the place where the Prachetas arrived was the abode of Lord Shiva. Impersonalists are generally worshippers of Lord Shiva, but Lord Shiva is never without variety in his abode. Thus, wherever one goes, whether to the planet of Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu, or Lord Brahma, there is variety to be enjoyed by persons full in knowledge and bliss. Okay, so I'll pause here and see if there's any discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Prabhu, in the verse, one of the verses when that we saw about Lord Shiva, the verse itself, there is nothing to say that he is demigod, right? Only on the translation Prabhupada writes he is a demigod. So is there any indication in the verse itself that it indicates that Lord Shiva is a demigod? Just by looking at the verse itself, per se. Just for the preaching points. The verse number, let me see. 18, verse number 18. This was just for the preaching point, because we have to be equipped with any debate or anything that comes along. Somebody asks.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. If I were to speculate, the reason Prabhupada writes in the translation that Lord Shiva, the most powerful demigod, second only to Vishnu, is because of the choice of words to describe Lord Shiva over here, right? It says that Atmaram Biyastvasya Lokakalpasya Radhase Shakti Yukta Vichrati Gorya Bhagwan Bhava. And so Bhava is Lord Shiva and Bhagwan is Bhagwan. So I think Srila Prabhupada wants to dissipate any misunderstanding that Maitreya is describing Lord Shiva as the personality of Godhead. And in many places he says that while Bhagwan is used to describe Krishna, but it is also used to describe any elevated personality, anyone who is more replete in the opulences. Bhagwan is sometimes used to describe Indra. It's often used to describe Brahma. But there the sense is that it's just because they're exalted personalities. So I think Prabhupada wants to make sure that one does not get misled by the word Bhagwan. So he basically emphasizes on the position of Lord Shiva. And factually speaking, Prabhupada never claimed to write like an Sanskritically precise translation. That was not his purpose. His purpose was essentially to give the meaning behind the verse. Like Prabhupada, like it is said that Prabhupada's translation also co-opt his purports. Right, so that's why he takes liberties in translating. His word to words are generally accurate, but when he translates, then he takes liberties for this purpose. I don't know if I described to you the Prabhupada in Chennai. Have I told that story? Prabhupada in Chennai, and Prabhupada was in Chennai, and Sanskrit scholar came to meet him. And he had spent a lot of time studying Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And then he had prepared a note of all the places where Prabhupada's translation did not match up with the Sanskrit grammar. So he came to Prabhupada and he says, the Sanskrit is this. And he was a Sanskrit scholar, so he knew what he was talking about. So he said, the Sanskrit says this, but you have said this, the Sanskrit says this, and you have said this, and as per this rule of grammar, this is not accurate. So for half an hour, he kept basically pointing out all these things to Prabhupada. Prabhupada kept listening to him. And then Prabhupada says, please have some prasadam before you leave. I said, okay. And Prabhupada's disciples were also in the room. And they said, Prabhupada, why did you let him speak to you like that? He was just kept criticizing you, and you were just quietly sitting and letting him do that. And then Prabhupada said, didn't you notice that how many times he said Krishna when he was discussing this with me? So that was the mode of Prabhupada, that he wanted everything that he did, he wanted to get the reader close to Krishna. That's why if you look at the earlier chapters in Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is talking mostly about karma or jnana, and Prabhupada keeps translating it to bhakti. Right? And not because Prabhupada doesn't know what it means, of course he knows, but Gurujan Prabhu says that Prabhupada is revealing the ultimate intentions of Krishna while he is trying to remove the roadblocks to it. That's his service to his guru and his guidance to us.
In this verse, Prabhu, there is one word which says Radhase. Prabhupada translates as for the matter of helping in its existence. So I don't know whether that makes any that implies that Lord Shiva's role is in helping in the existence, not the primary cause of existence. So I don't know. I'm just trying to see whether there is any indication. If the Radhase was accurately Prabhupada translated, then that kind of shows a little bit of indication that that Lord Shiva's position. I don't know. I'm just thinking, Prabhu. Speculating. I'm just speculating.
It's possible. I haven't read any descriptions in that detail. From the sources that I've read, it isn't in that detail. Generally, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's translations differ a little bit from Prabhupada's translation. He tends to be more true to the grammar. I can look that up. I have his translation. I can look that up and see what Vishwanath Chakravarti says.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Just want to add here also, like how Srila Prabhupada is so merciful to try to give us Krishna Bhakti, just right away. He doesn't want us to wait. Just like he said that we should not go to the 10th canto immediately, but he gave us Krishna book right from the beginning.
That is true. That's true. That he goes to great pains because he knows that people will go to the 10th canto. So rather than going and reading it on their own, so if you I remember very early on in my Krishna consciousness, little difficult for me to read the verses and the purports. So then I came across a Krishna book and I looked at the contents and I thought, okay, this is Krishna Leela, killing of Putana and all this. It'll be interesting. I was always interested in pastimes. And Prabhupada has so much of philosophy in Krishna book, right? He puts it in a very attractive way, but he does not. So it's not that he just exposes the personal pastimes and interactions of Krishna without putting all the guardrails around. And if you read the book, you'll notice that Prabhupada has so much of philosophy that he has put in to ensure that. And there were two reasons why Prabhupada wrote the Krishna book. One was that he did not know, because he was old at the time, he did not know that he will be around for the time that his translation on the Bhagavatam will be completed. And to some extent, it was actually prophetic because Prabhupada was not able to translate. His translations, Prabhupada's purports stop at the 13th chapter of the 10th canto. And then from the 14th chapter, the translation comes from the disciples of Prabhupada, from the Praise of Lord Brahma. So he wanted to make sure that, the summum bonum, the highest goal of Bhagavatam is still given to his disciples and others. So he wrote the Krishna book. And secondly, also because he knew that there were people who would be more attracted to Krishna's pastimes. They would not have the patience to go through the Bhagavatam. So better for them to read it with all the philosophy in place. So that's why he wrote the Krishna book. And it was actually now it's not that much, but at one point it was a hugely popular book. People would read in the temples. Krishna books were read on a daily basis, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the evenings. A lot of discussions would happen on Krishna books. It was very, very, very popular book early days.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. So if there's no more questions, we can continue with verse 24-25. Tareva sarasastasma nishkramantam sahanugam upagiyamanam mama pravaram vibhutanugay taptahema nikayamam Siti kantham trilochanam prasad samukham viksha pranemo jatakatukaha. The Prachetas were fortunate to see Lord Shiva, the chief of the demigods, emerging from the water with his associates. His body lustre was like molten gold. His throat was bluish, and he had 3 eyes, which looked very mercifully upon his devotees. He was accompanied by many musicians who were glorifying him. As soon as the Prachetas saw Lord Shiva, they immediately offered their obeisances in great amazement and fell down at the lotus feet of the Lord. So the verse briefly describes the form of Lord Shiva. So his skin is the color of molten gold, and his throat is bluish. So later on it will come that it's because he drank the halahal poison during the Samudra Manthan, and then he held it in his throat became bluish. And then there are some other acharyas who actually reject that explanation, saying that Lord Shiva does not have to hold the poison in his throat. He is powerful enough to digest the poison. So it's not that Lord Shiva is scared that if the poison goes into his body, it will poison him. He can digest the poison. But the reason his throat is bluish because he is always chanting the names of Krishna. And because Krishna's body is bluish, and the name is not different from the body, his throat is also bluish. Then he's also described as having 3 eyes and accompanied by his devotees, and then other denizens of the higher planets like the Gandharvas. So Prabhupada says that because Lord Shiva is always very, very merciful, his name is Ashutosh. Amongst all the demigods, Lord Shiva can be pacified even by the lowest class of men who need only offer him obeisances and leaves of a bale tree. Thus his name is Ashutosh, which means that he is pleased very quickly. So because Lord Shiva has this nature of being very easily pleased, there are sometimes when Lord Vishnu has to come to correct the situation. So there is the famous example of Vrikasur, that he got the benediction from Lord Shiva that whoever he puts his hand on will die. And then Vrikasur, who for such a long time was worshipping Lord Shiva, cutting off pieces of his body and offering it into the fire. And when he gets the benediction from Lord Shiva, he becomes lusty towards Parvati Devi. So he thinks that if he'll kill Lord Shiva, then he can have Parvati Devi for himself. So he runs after Lord Shiva, trying to put his hand on his head. And then the Lord Vishnu comes as a young boy, and then he says that you should not believe Lord Shiva. And he talks about characteristics of Lord Shiva in a seemingly denigrative manner, but actually glorification of Lord Shiva. And then he says, you should not trust him. Just test out whether this benediction works or not. Put your hand on your head and see what happens. So Brikasur put his hand on his head and he died. He was there. So we see that because Lord Shiva is so merciful and quickly gives benediction, especially to those who are in the modes. So Lord Vishnu comes. On the other hand, Lord Vishnu will never give a benediction that is not for the ultimate benefit of the person. Or he will never give a benediction that will cause disturbance in the universe. A little bit different nature than Lord Shiva. Now, of course, there are times when Lord Vishnu curses, and that causes disturbance. But that's a curse. But he will never give a benediction that is not for the benefit of the devotee. So the difference is made between gain and benefit. That sometimes Lord Shiva gives benedictions that may be for the gain of the person. That I will gain some wealth, or I will gain some power, or some mystic opulences, but it may not benefit the person. But when Lord Vishnu gives a benediction, it may not be a gain, but it will be for the benefit of the person. Moving on to verse 26. Satan pranati haro, Satan prapanati haro, Bhagavan dharma vatsalaha, dharma jnana shila sampanam, pritaha pritan vachaha. Lord Shiva became very pleased with the Prachetas, because generally Lord Shiva is the protector of pious persons and persons of gentle behavior. Being very much pleased with the princess, he began to speak as follows. So in this verse, the first two lines, they describe Lord Shiva, and the last two lines, they describe the Prachetas. And the verse indicates the synergy between what pleases Lord Shiva and the pleasing quality of the Prachetas. So Lord Shiva is Dharma Vatsala. So he's very fond of religious principles. And the Prachetas are described as Dharma Janan, that Dharma Gyan, as persons who are very aware of religious principles. Then Lord Shiva is described as Bhagavan, exalted personality, and the Prachetas are described as Shila Sampanna, as very well behaved, and Pritina, of gentle behavior. So because of this synergy, Lord Shiva manifests the mood of Prapanarti Haro. Prapanaharo means one who takes away, and Prapanarti is dangers. So because the qualities that pleased Lord Shiva were present in the Prachetas, Lord Shiva became protective about them and happy with them. So here Lord Shiva is described as Dharma Vatsala. So Vatsala means one who has a lot of affection, right? And Krishna is described as Bhakta Vatsala. So the difference between Shiva and Krishna is explained by Prabhupada in the purport. He says that Vishnu or Krishna is known as Bhakta Vatsala, and herein we find Lord Shiva described as Dharma Vatsala. Of course, the word Dharma Vatsala refers to a person who lives according to religious principles. This is understood. Nonetheless, these two words have additional significance. Sometimes Lord Shiva has to deal with persons who are in the modes of passion and ignorance. Such persons are not always very much religious and pious in their activities, But since they worship Lord Shiva for some material profit, they sometimes obey the religious principles. As soon as Lord Shiva sees that his devotees are following religious principle, he blesses them. The Prachetas, sons of Prachinavari, were naturally very pious and gentle, and consequently Lord Shiva was immediately pleased with. Lord Shiva could understand that the princes were sons of Vaishnavas, and as such, Lord Shiva offered prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as follows. So Prabhupada kind of explains that why Lord Shiva is Dharma Vatsal, because he is dealing with people who are adharmic. So when he sees them become dharmic, he becomes pleased. So he sees with people who are irreligious, taking intoxication or committing sinful activities, basically breaking the principles of dharma. So when they take shelter of Lord Shiva, they try to become dharmic. They try to follow the Vedic injunctions. And then Lord Shiva becomes affectionate to them. Krishna, on the other hand, is dealing with people who are already at a very exalted level. So he becomes affectionate when they actually leave the principles of dharma. So Lord Shiva becomes affectionate when they take to the principles of dharma. Krishna becomes affectionate when they leave the principles of dharma. Of course, it's not that they leave the principles of dharma and become adharmic, but they leave the principles of dharma to follow the principles of paradharma, which is exclusive devotion to Krishna. So difference in the mood of Lord Shiva and Krishna. Okay, now Lord Shiva will begin to speak. Sri Rudruvacha Yuyam Vedisita Putra Viditam Vasachikershitam Anugraya Bhadram Va Evam Nidarshanam Kritam. Lord Shiva said, "You are all the sons of King Prachinavari, and I wish all good fortune to you. I also know what you are going to do, and therefore I am visible to you just to show my mercy upon you." So it's not that the meeting of Lord Shiva and the Prachetas was accidental. It's not that Lord Shiva was going one way, the Prachetas were going another way, and they suddenly happened to meet at that lake. But Lord Shiva says that I have deliberately come over here. And the Prachetas have not called upon Lord Shiva. So there are people who worship Lord Shiva for thousands of years. And they perform many austerities and they cut their body parts. And Lord Shiva comes with great reluctance. And then he gives them minimal benedictions and leaves. But here we see that he is so pleased by those who are worshipping the Lord that he is on his own coming, even though they are not calling upon him. So in general, when a jiva takes to bhakti, then it automatically attracts the mercy of the devas, headed by Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva will expand on this in the next verse. Prabhupada makes a very important point in the purport that the Prachetas, they were not yet established as devotees of the Lord. So they were going with the intention of worshipping the Supreme Lord. That was enough to attract the mercy and benediction of the devas headed by Lord Shiva. Right? So that's one important point. That's the potency of bhakti. that even in its nation status, even when the person is resolving that I should do bhakti, the devas become pleased. So therefore, Prabhupada says, no need to please the demigods separately, because they're already pleased. In fact, if you try to please them separately, they will become less pleased. Because the reason they were initially pleased was because of the person's resolve to worship the Supreme Lord. But then they say, oh, this person is now playing it safe. He's worshipping Lord Vishnu on Mondays and Lord Shiva on Wednesdays and Lord and Durga Devi on Fridays. And they'll say, that initial attraction will go away. Then Prabhupada makes the point that because the devas are pleased by one who is endeavoring for bhakti, there is no need to ask for material benedictions from the devas. Because when the devas are pleased, they automatically offer him everything that he needs. Prabhupada says the demigods are servants of the Lord, and they're always prepared to help a devotee in all circumstances. Later he says, thus there is no need for a devotee of Krishna to endeavor for material opulence or liberation. By situated in transcendental position of devotional service, he receives all the benefits of dharma, artha, kam, and moksha. So we see some cases in the Bhagavatam where how the devas are attracted to the Lord's devotees. We see when Parikshit Maharaj went to sit on the banks of the river Ganga, he did not pray for any demigods. His resolve was, I'll fix my mind on Krishna and wait out the 70s. But just his resolve, it attracted all the exalted personalities in the universe. And similarly, we see that when Bhishma Dev was ready to give up his body, his mood was that let my mind focus exclusively on Lord Krishna. But who was present? It is said that all the exalted personalities, the demigods, they were all congregated around him because of their affection to the devotees. Similarly, we see in the case of Jat Bharat that he was once captured by dacoits and they wanted to do a human sacrifice to Bhadrakali. And from the description, the understanding is that Bhadrakali was accepting human sacrifices from the dacoits. But this particular case, she became very, very angry because the sacrifice was that of a Vaishnava. And she was so angry that she was actually wanting to destroy the whole universe. But she just killed the dacoits. So the devas themselves being devotees, they do not tolerate offenses against other Vaishnavas, against other devotees. Okay, let's go to verse 28. Yaha param ram hasaha sakshat triguna jiva samgita Bhagwantam Vasudevam Prapannosa Priyo Hime. Lord Shiva continued, any person who surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, the controller of everything, material nature as well as the living entity is actually very dear to me. So here Lord Shiva is giving the reason why he, on his own volition, has come to give mercy to the Prachetas. So he says that you have surrendered completely to the Lord. Right? And then in order to make sure that there is no confusion when he says Bhagwantam Vasudevam, there is no confusion, he also describes the attributes of the Lords. So, Vishwanath Chakravarti, when he is describing the second half of, or the attributes of the verse, he quotes Sridhar Swami. And Sridhar Swami expands on these attributes differently from Prabhupada. So the reason I'm bringing this to attention is because reading Prabhupada's purport, one may wonder that why is Prabhupada speaking so strongly about certain things, but really what he's doing is that he in his purport, he's addressing some of the possible confusion that one may have by reading Sridhar Swami's purport. So, as per Sridhar Swami, such a devotee is considered to be param, superior to the subtle ramasa, pradhan or prakriti, which is another way of saying that he has transcended the modes of material nature. Then he is also superior to Purusha. So here it is said that Jiva Samgyatat. So Jiva Samgyatat refers to Paramatma. And this is where Prabhupada wants to make sure there's no confusion. So Sridhar Swami seems to be saying that one who is surrendered to the personality of Godhead becomes superior to the Paramatma. Prabhupada, in the purport, he gives many quotes to establish that this Purusha refers to not Paramatma, but to the Jiva. Right? So he gives a second possible explanation that when Lord Shiva is giving these characteristics, he is not describing a Jiva, but he is describing the Lord. So saying that the Lord is superior to everything, to Maya Shakti, Jiva Shakti, then Ramasa, Prabhupada says this translates to Brahman, which has no qualities. So this has to point to Lord Krishna. Right? And then he quotes 18:27, where Krishna says that I am the basis of the Brahman. So essentially what Prabhupada is saying, what the verse is describing is, the person who surrenders fully to Krishna does so without mixing karma, deva puja or gyan, and such a person is dear to Lord Shiva. So Prabhupada, he also uses this his purport to establish the position of Krishna and the relationship between the demigods and the devotees. And he gives various Shastric quotes to establish his position with authority. It's a very comprehensive purport, that it talks about the conditioned jiva in the material world, the liberated jiva in the material world, the liberated jiva in the spiritual world. Kind of gives a complete description of creation. So I'll quickly go through it. It's purport that one should read several times to understand it nicely. So Prabhupada says, Bhagwantam Vasudevam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is Vasudev. Vasudev is also mentioned in the beginning of Bhagavatam as Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, that he is the ultimate truth. Right? So that is the description of personality of Godhead. Then Sapriyo Hime. So Lord Vasudeva Krishna is worshipable not only by the living entities, but by demigods like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, and others. So he means certainly, me means by me, that such a person is very dear to me. Who? Lord Krishna. So even exalted personalities like Brahma and Shiva, are worshipping Krishna. And then he quotes Bhagavatam 12:13:1. Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Stuvanti Divyastava. He says Brahma, Varun, Indra, Rudra, Marut. So these are all who are Stuvanti Divyastava, who are always glorifying Krishna. That's the position of Krishna. Then what about the position of Krishna's devotees? So Prabhupada says that Krishna is the most exalted and his devotees are most rare. So he quotes 7:19 Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam Janmanamante. Same point is made by Chitraketu in 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, where he says that among many millions who are liberated and perfect in knowledge, one may be a devotee of Narayana, Narayana Parayana. Such devotees are extremely peaceful and are extremely rare. Because they are so rare, even the devas are eager to support them. So that's the point that's being made. Then Jiva Samgyata. This is pointing to Lord Vasudeva or Krishna. And here Prabhupada is implicitly refuting the point made by Sridhar Swami. And again, I don't have access to Sridhar Swami's purport. Maybe there is more context to it, because my sense of Prabhupada is explaining it as opposed to refuting it. But he quotes 3 verses, all from Bhagavad Gita, to establish the position of Krishna with respect to Purushottam. Right? So he quotes 15:18, where Krishna says, "I'm Purushottama." So that refutes the concept that the Jiva can be Paramatma, or Jiva can be the Purusha. Then he quotes 15:7, where he says, "Mamevamsha Jiva Loka," that actually the Jivas are part and parcel of the Lord. And then Bhagavad Gita 7:5, Krishna says, "Aparyam etavastva vanyam prakritim vidimi param." That Krishna is saying that these Jivas are my energy. Right? So they are dependent on Krishna, not the other way around. Then understanding Brahman or Ramhasa, Prabhupada says that there are 2 kinds of living entities. There's Akshara, who have fallen down and become conditioned. Akshar, those who are not conditioned. The vast majority live in the spiritual world and are called Akshar, and they are in the position of Brahman or pure existence. Right? So Ramasa here does not refer to the impersonal Brahman, but to the pure spiritual existence of the Akshara, or the eternally liberated souls. As far as the Ksharas are concerned, they are 3 gunas. So they are basically under the 3 modes of Prakriti. And Krishna is described as the enjoyer of the Prakriti, Purusha, and the supreme proprietor of Prakriti. So he is Prakriti and he is also Purush. And then Prabhupada concludes that even if it were to refer to Brahman as the impersonal Brahman, Prabhupada says that the impersonal Brahman is nevertheless subordinate to Krishna, as given in 14:27, Brahmano hi pratisthama, and confirmed in Brahma Samhita, Yasya Prabha Prabhutu. So it concludes that all respects Vasudeva Krishna is the Supreme Lord, and Lord Shiva is very satisfied with those who are completely surrendered to him. Complete surrender is desired by Krishna, and as he indicates in the last chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Sarvadharman Parityaga. So Prabhupada stresses that complete surrender to emphasize that partial or indirect surrender is not appreciated either by the Lord or the demigods. So he says the conclusion is that a devotee of the Lord Shiva is not dear to Lord Shiva, but a devotee of Lord Krishna is very dear to Lord Shiva. It's a powerful statement he makes. Now, not dear is using it in a relative context. That compared to a devotee of Krishna, the devotee of Shiva is not dear to Shiva. Of course, Lord Shiva is favorable to his devotees, but he is much, much more favorable to the devotees of Lord Vishnu. Okay, so I'll pause here and see if there is any discussion. This chapter tends to be technical, and it will get more so later on when the Rudra Gita starts, because Lord Shiva also speaks and with lot of metaphors, and it speaks very deep philosophy. So Prabhupada, in his purports, he writes extensively to help us understand the instructions of Lord Shiva. So Wednesday we will start. Hopefully we'll start. The Rudra Gita starts from verse 33, so which is just a few verses away. So hopefully Wednesday we will start with the Rudra Gita.
Prabhu, can I ask one question? Is it okay?
Sure. Prabhu.
About you were explaining about Sadashiva is in Vaikuntha Loka. He is situated in the Vaikuntha Loka, and so he's same as Vishnu Tattva, right, Prabhu?
Yeah.
Shambhu, on the other hand, is in between Sadashiva and Shiva, who's controlling the material nature. Am I right or wrong? My understanding is right.
Right.
Okay.
He's
so
an expansion of Sadashiva.
Shambhu is expansion of Sadashiva.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I want to know. And Shambhu is not a Vishnu Tattva, is it?
He's not. He's Shiva Tattva.
Shiva Tattva. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu. Just a small things.
Yeah, Shiva has his own tattva, just because he's kind of his spiritual, he's Vishnu, he's Jiva, but he's also special. Later on, Lord Shiva will himself say that a Jiva can become Brahma, but then he doesn't say that a Jiva can become Shiva. He says Jiva can become Brahma, or if he's even more perfect, he can become my associate. So because Lord Shiva's position is fixed, or the personality of occupying Lord Shiva's position is fixed, Lord Shiva makes that clear. You can't become Lord Shiva, but you can become my associate if you're even more advanced than Brahma.
In the south, I notice, I don't know whether you will understand the language, but when somebody passes away, they say Shiva Padavi Adindar, meaning they attained Shiva's position. So this is what the South Indians, believe. It's very sad, but that is and they get really irritated when we talk about Shiva's position and Vishnu and things like that. I really irritated a lot of people in my preaching. So that's why I'm more and more, trying to understand this so that I can be more sensitive and more approachable, not unnecessarily agitate others. Anyway, that's sorry about belaboring this on this point.
Sure, I understand. And one point to talk about is the glories of Lord Shiva. I mean, I've seen people handle this two ways. One is they talk about the places where Lord Shiva takes shelter of Krishna, right? Mohini Murti pastime, then the Tripurari pastime, and Banasur. So there are 3 or 4 places where distinctly it is seen that Lord Shiva is taking shelter of Lord Vishnu. One place where we see Vishnu taking shelter of Shiva, which is Samudra Manthan. And that also, I mean, that the Acharyas have an explanation. But a good place to start off is to talk about the exalted qualities of Lord Shiva and how he is appreciated by Vaishnavas as being a topmost devotee, and all the services that he's that was a big change in heart for me also, when even when I read all the services that Lord Shiva is doing. He's taking shelter, giving shelter to those who are in the mode of passion and ignorance. He is his followers are the Bhut and the Pishachas because nobody else is willing to take them. So Lord Shiva, out of compassion, he takes them. So that may open heart. But if somebody is fixed on this position, then not much you can do. Somebody really fixed that. Lord Shiva. Shivam also means auspicious. And so sometimes people confuse the word with the person. That somebody has attained an auspicious position, and they will say somebody has attained Shiva. And we see that in this also, how the word we'll see it later on actually. Not in this, and maybe I can talk about it, but in the offenses to the chanting of the holy name. Some acharyas consider Shivam to be pointing to Lord Shiva, the second offense, and some acharyas consider Shivam to be pointing to the glories of the holy name, not really to Lord Shiva. There's a slight difference in the understanding. Okay, so thank you for the discussion, and we'll end here. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anantapuri Vaishnavinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Thai Gaur Prem. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.